Can Rayo copy the Kaiser Impact is one of the debates I've seen most online. Some people argue that it's an ability exclusive to Kaiser, while some people argue that being a talented learner where he trained his kick, then it's also possible for Rayo to copy it. So in today's video I just want to answer that question, but before I do, please do like and subscribe as it helps the channel. So let's begin with Rayo as a character and look into his copy ability. We know from episode Nagi that he copied Shido's goal in the 4v4 against Corona's team, and we also see him mimic Yukimiya's goal in the third selection. In both instances he shows he is able to copy geniuses and top tier moves almost instantly. Now the thing is that copy abilities in almost all media, not just Blue Lock, are overpowered, and we see that where both Shido and Ego praise his copy ability. However, they usually have some drawback or limit to how strong they actually are, and in this instance Rayo's limitations relates to his physical capabilities. In the third selection we see him directly state that some people's talents can exceed 100% that normal people could never acquire no matter how hard they work. As for Rayo, he currently rates his stats as an all-arounder with about 90 in everything, where similarly his stats in the NEL share this sentiment of dexterity, and from that we know he is a balanced all-arounder. But the other key point is that he states that his max capacity is 99%. That's not his current level, it's just the upper limit he can reach, and he also reiterates that later in the match too. We then go on to see Hiyori talk about the constraints of being a mere copy, where the limit is brought up once again, where his limit means his weapon can never be as good as weapons from the people he copies. So just like Iski said, the constraint is that he can't copy physical attributes such as speed and height, which makes sense. He will never run as fast as people like Loki and Chigiri, who are blessed with great genetics, who are also training and honing their speed. And he will never be as tall as people like Ishikari or Ayu, and therefore his jumping and aerial reach will never be as high either. And to summarize, we've established the core of Rayo's copy ability. He can copy technical abilities, however he can't copy physical. Knowing this raises the important question whether Rayo can learn the Kaiser Impact, and as if it's a weapon based on individual ability which can't be copied, or is it a technical ability that can? But before discussing that, we have to learn what exactly is the Kaiser Impact. We first see this weapon in the FC Barca match where it's first shown. By baiting with a direct shot, he then traps it and instantly fires the first Kaiser Impact. The hit itself is incredibly fast due to him having the world's fastest swing speed, and Noel describes the weapon as him focusing his body leverage into his right leg, allowing for his leg to swing so fast. Also, I need to emphasize, this does not mean he has the fastest shot in the world. There is a difference between the fastest swing and fastest shot, that being Kaiser interacts with the ball fastest when kicking, but that doesn't necessarily make it the fastest shot, as other attributes like technique, mass and power when hitting the ball affect how fast the ball travels. Now at this moment Kaiser is referred to as a genius, but this was before the established relationship between geniuses and talented learners was explored. But even then, Kaiser is explicitly said to have the world's fastest swing speed, which is a physical attribute despite how hard the author is trying to make it sound. You can never have the world's best anything without some sort of genetical advantage, which I'll explain in more detail later. In the Manshine game we see the Kaiser Impact once again, but while using Predator Eye, and we have it once again established to be a world-class weapon. It also goes on to tell us Kaiser's goal formula as a mixture of Metavision and his Kaiser Impact. But after the goal we see an important panel with Iski saying, Kaiser's unique extraordinary weapon isn't something I could acquire even if I trained my whole life. Despite being a fellow talented learner, Iski believes that he himself cannot develop the weapon, and so if Iski can't learn it, then why could Rayo? However, I need to reiterate that this was before the establishment of the ego types were discussed, and so at this point he thinks of Kaiser as a genius instead of a talented learner. But even then I believe the sentiment holds true where Iski could never train to gain the Kaiser Impact, it's just something he could never do. In the Ubers game we once again see Kaiser attempt to score with a Kaiser Impact before being fouled. However, he does the impossible and hits a Kaiser Impact mid-air, referred to as an overhead ricochet nutmeg bullet shot, which is basically just a bicycle kick. This is also another shot that Iski notes he cannot copy. In the match we also see that Kaiser attempts 2 more Kaiser Impacts where both fail to score the final goal, but we still see him shoot the Kaiser Impact. After the humiliating loss, we see Kaiser train even harder, where we briefly see the backstory between Ness and Kaiser, where he scores from a Kaiser Impact which mesmerized Ness, with him eventually training and learning about the Magnus Shot, his new weapon. As we go into the next match, we see in the PXG game he fails the Kaiser Impact a few times. As the match continues, we see Kaiser start to fall apart and miss with the Magnus Shot, but we see the explanation around his weapon and shots. When kicking a ball, there is air resistance, which determines how much the ball spins and curves. His original weapon in Kaiser Impact is directly explained to be a shot with great speed, force, and have a straight trajectory where there is no spin to the ball. But now we have the newly formed Magnus Shot, which adds rotation to the pre-established Kaiser Impact, giving it a crazy curve. Since he needed the ball to be stationary, he couldn't perfect the spin, and therefore it bends way off track for probably the worst missed goal in the series. Eventually, he redeems himself by scoring the second goal, utilizing the Kaiser Impact type Magnus Shot. We also continue the match with him attempting the Kaiser Impact a few more times, but I think the Magnus Shot is important in establishing the actual kick. I think the thing that confuses people most and leads to debates is what the Kaiser Impact actually is. Like, is it the specific shot and way of shooting the ball, or is it rather a shot embedded with the world's fastest swing? Like, we have Kaiser talk about the original Kaiser Impact as a shot with great speed, force, and has a straight trajectory, but when you have his Magnus Shot referred to as Kaiser Impact 2, then that makes no sense as the shooting technique between the two shots are completely different. I think most people know that when you kick a ball, the position of impact and the way you kick it influences the ball's trajectory, and in both instances of the standard Kaiser Impact and the Kaiser Impact variant Magnus Shot requires the ball to be hit differently. I also want to point out that the standard Kaiser Impact technique is not that complicated. He's just putting his weight on his right foot and hitting the ball with no curve. In layman's terms, it's fundamentally just a glorified power shot. The best example is just look at FC Barca's conclusion. Kaiser was in a position to score the final goal with a Kaiser Impact if EC just passed him the ball, but he chose Kunigami. Here we see Kunigami put his weight into his left foot rather than the right and hit his power shot. It's a hit with a straight trajectory, force and speed. Basically the same description Kaiser described his Kaiser Impact we see Kunigami hit. No one was saying Kunigami just scored a Kaiser Impact for hitting the same goal, or that he is copying Kaiser, because it's just a power shot. The Kaiser Impact was a weapon that Kaiser developed himself. It was described as an overwhelming weapon that proves his existence and make an impact, hence the name of the shot as he goes on to leave an impact to the world. So the exact way to interpret the original Kaiser Impact is that it is fundamentally a power shot mixed with the fact he has the world's fastest swing. Without the core attribute being the swing, then that means there's no Kaiser Impact as the speed to hit the impact point is what it truly is. So when we have the Kaiser Impact type Magnus, that just means that the power shot in the original formula was updated so that it is just the world's fastest swing with a curved hit rather than a power shot. And so now we know what the Kaiser Impact actually is, and now we can talk about whether Ryo can actually copy the Kaiser Impact or not. We know that Kaiser started playing soccer at around age 12 and much later than the rest of the cast, and we also see in his backstory that he trained his leg swing specifically as a way to put his rage onto something. He has been training a majority of his developing life around that kick, allowing him to reach the high threshold of having the world's fastest swing. With around 7 years he has honed his abilities, and so can Ryo copy something like that with almost no time training specifically for it, and the answer is no. A lot of people argue that being a talented learner means that his weapon can be replicated, but that's not necessarily true. The talented learner and genius outlook is more of a way a player approaches their gameplay and optimize their play. So just like how Iski believes that he can't copy the weapon, it's likely true for Ryo as well. Kaiser developed his weapon in a way to adapt to the world and maximize his growth. That's why he is regarded as a talented learner even with a world-class weapon that seems genius-like. I mentioned earlier that the world's fastest swing requires some genetical advantage no matter what you believe, irregardless of them being a genius or talented learner. It's a physical attribute, just like being the world's fastest, the world's tallest, highest jump, etc. If Kaiser had no genetical advantage, then there would be some other person on the planet who has the world's fastest swing rather than him. Don't get me wrong, Kaiser worked his ass off and it isn't down to pure genetics, similar to how Chigiri and Loki both worked hard to get where they are. After all, you have to put effort to reach the top level, but there is no denying that genetical advantages do exist, even if it's in varying levels. Another character I want to point out is Hiyori. He was born to be genetically perfect, where both his parents only had him for the sake of being the best, and even Karasu praised his genetical gifts. But despite having blessed genes, he is a talented learner, so just because a person is a talented learner does not mean they can't have advantages. They are only classified that depending on how they play the game. So Kaiser can have a genetical gift despite being a talented learner and training and developing his specific weapon. I think the best way to describe this is looking at other talented learners and other physical attributes, that being height and jumping ability. Our first talented learner is Nico, who is on the shorter end of the spectrum and I doubt has great aerial capabilities. He is young and growing to be fair, but he will never have an aerial reach like Ayu. Similarly, this applies to Isuki too, as they are both around 5'8 and 5'9 respectively. These two talented learners will never have the best jumping ability in the series. But now on the other side of the spectrum, I want to talk about Aiku. Now he is a talented learner too, but unlike the previous two, he is fairly tall at 6'3". Even as a talented learner, he has a genetical advantage in height and jumping ability, and probably has a greater vertical than a lot of people, including geniuses whose weapons relate to jumping, like potentially someone like Kuon. But what about a talented learner even taller than Aiku, and that is potentially Snuffy? Now we don't have a specific height or even if he can jump higher than Aiku or Ayu. All we can do is compare him to the 6 foot tall Noah, who is slightly slouching, and so he could be around 6'4 or even 6'5. He is in the top 1% of men across the world in height, and thus he has a genetical advantage despite being a talented learner. Which is my main point. Both Aiku and Snuffy have amazing physical attributes and genetics regarding their physical height and jumping capabilities despite being talented learners. So similarly, I think Kaiser does have genes allowing to reach the best, where he is on the extreme upper limit regarding the swing speed spectrum while being a talented learner. There may be players with bad genetics regarding swing speed, but Kaiser trained better, resulting in the best. All I'm saying is that Kaiser has physical capabilities that may not be able to be possessed or copied, because at the end of the day, to have the best trait and attribute in a specific area requires you to have some sort of genetical advantage. So when we look at Ryo, he is the ultimate all-arounder where he's basically amazing at everything, although around 90% in each field. Even in height, Ryo is 6'1", like he is blessed genetically in his own way, especially compared to people like Nico and Izuki. But just like how he is better at jumping than those two, there are people that can jump higher than him, like Aiku, Snuffy or Ayu. And so on the swing speed spectrum, it is similar, where Ryo is probably faster than Izuki, although much slower than Kaiser. Even if Ryo swings super fast, that does not make it a Kaiser Impact, as that would just be a power shot. Without the world's fastest swing, you cannot have the Kaiser Impact, which is why it's an exclusive weapon Kaiser developed. If you remember earlier, Ryo mentioned people can exceed 100% in specific attributes, and that perfectly applies to Kaiser's swing speed, as it's heralded as the fastest in the world, where it's something Ryo can't try or mimic, as he himself is bounded to 99% as a max capacity. But let's say you still believe Kaiser being a talented learner means he can be copied, and let's say that Ryo has genetics allowing him to have a similar threshold to Kaiser on the spectrum, and could hypothetically obtain the world's fastest swing. Could he then obtain the Kaiser Impact? And the answer is no once again. Kaiser's playstyle comes from his Kaiser Impact, it's the source of his plays and him being the best, but the same can't be said about Ryo. He is someone who calculates and copies appropriately, and to do that he needs a body that is completely balanced. An unbalanced body will weaken specific areas and therefore decrease his performance. I bring this up because of Chris Prince's helpful advice when training the Manshine boys. You won't improve if you train your body recklessly, where their bodies differ player to player. For From his introduction, Chris warns us about a player changing their playstyle and body, and a similar thing would likely happen to Rayo. By training and changing to a Kaiser-like playstyle and body, his performance would likely decrease as his body shifts from a more equally balanced body, allowing more freedom to copy, to a more restrictive body that performs better in specific areas, but reduces the quality in other areas. So even if Rayo could naturally reach the same swing speed as Kaiser, it's not in his best interest to do so. So overall, Rayo cannot obtain the world's fastest swing and therefore cannot copy the Kaiser Impact exactly. However, I do want to mention that he can definitely copy the technique in order to pull off a Magnus shot, but the key part of the Kaiser Impact is something Rayo isn't able to copy. With that being said, thanks for watching, let me know your opinions and arguments, and as always, Buddha be praised and have a good day.